welcome. We've got a funding focus session all around understanding the Supporting the Supporters Fund with the Sidell Collins Foundation. How today will run, so we're going to look a bit at the history of Sidell Collins, what the aims are, any key dates and info, and then sort of getting to the details of what the fund actually covers, what we can and cannot support, any top tips, Sidell Collins Foundation more generally, and sort of how the process will work with CCF. So Sidell Collins Foundation was set up in 2006. Annie will tell me if any of this is incorrect, by Ray Sidell and John Collins, with a mission to empower and sustain vital community services. The range of what can be done is vast. It might be supporting men's mental health or supporting women who have been victims of domestic violence. Their legacy is now continued by 4 trustees, including Annie, who use their expertise to oversee careful management of the fund in line with the couple's wishes and experiences. So the foundation itself works with CCF, but alongside that also work with Devon Community Foundation and Jersey Community Foundation. And it's this foundation that's responsible for establishing this Supporting the Supporters Fund. Why did it come about? Well, this sort of percentage hit me quite hard. Actually, research conducted by Third Sector found that 94.3% of charity workers, whether that's staff, volunteers, had felt stressed, overwhelmed, or burnt out over the past year. Of course, a lot of our focus is supporting those that have various needs. That can come with a lot of, I suppose, weight and pressure to the supporters themselves. And often there is not a fund specifically for the supporters and what it can do to their well-being in that sense. So that's why the Supporting the Supporters Fund was set up. It's operated in other community foundations, but this is the first time that CCF specifically will run it as its own standalone fund. So of course, with that will come different questions and how it will run, and it's the first time for us as well, so it's going to develop. The Sidell Collins Foundation Support the Supporters Fund aims to help the individual and collective well-being of the voluntary sector staff and volunteers, hopefully preventing burnout and ensuring frontline workers can thrive in their roles. So it's all around the supporter. Yes, Annie?
Can I just add to that? It's also about sustainable support. So sustainable support both for the volunteer or member of staff, whoever it is, but also sustainable for the charity. And what we have found with some of the other charity foundations that we've worked with is that the response that's come back is that it's actually provided organisational change within the charity itself, making the charity more sustainable. So it has a far-reaching effect, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. And we pick up on it. I think it's about that longevity and it not being this quick one-off fix.
It's not a one-off. Go and have a dinner somewhere. Yeah,
of course. Fantastic. Thank you. So some key dates, I suppose, to think about as we go in. Of course, the application is open now on our website, ready to go. The deadline is the 30th of July, so there's a few weeks still left to get things sorted. That will then all be assessed and go to a panel discussion in September. That decision will be made in September, and around October was when you'll get the money come in. Grant value can range, so it goes from 500 to 5,000. So some ideas of what we can support. Of course, it's the first time we are running this, so we are open to see those different ideas, but actually to give you some guidelines is of course beneficial. So it could be maybe continuing some professional development courses, that may be the team going on a different specific course. It may be a workshop or an event, having someone come into the team, or it could be a one-to-one support related to well-being. There's different elements to that what we can and can't, I'll go into in a second. It might be some mentoring, buddying or peer support. So it could be having the capacity to be able to link a more senior volunteer or staff with an up-and-coming young member and having that mentoring together. bringing someone else in from another group to be able to mentor a member and pass on that ideas that you might not have had the capacity to do so beforehand. Or quite wide-ranging, it could be a creative arts, physical, nature-based activity that creates that space to do. And I think that links back to Annie's point of it being something sustainable and not a one-off, let's go and do this event. Actually, does it have time for reflection and change? And ultimately that leaves the participant, yes, feeling better, more confident in their role and functioning well, but being able to take that along through a long period of time, and not I feel good today, now let's go back to our usual ways of working that's led to this burnout. So to reiterate, I suppose, with something like a course, we want activities that should be over or above any statutory or professional requirements. This isn't the space to get money for your food hygiene course, because that's something that's statutory and needs to be done. It's not that going above and beyond and really putting well-being at the forefront. That is something that should be done anyway for you to function. And activities and items do not need to be connected to the job, so it doesn't have to constantly be direct to it, but it's about improving their well-being and ability to then respond and to cope with difficult situations that often these roles can find themselves in, and create confidence and clarity. So yeah, so it not having to be that is in my job role and so it must directly connect, but it's bringing those extras so that it prevents burnout eventually. Yes. So different things we might be interested in. We're particularly interested in funding activity that's new, creative, or pilot approaches. That's why we know there's going to be lots of different ideas that come in, but it's that over and above what is normally available that will enhance staff volunteer wellbeing. Activity that's led and informed by staff groups or peers. Sometimes I think there's nothing worse of plucking an idea out of thin air and thinking that will work. Actually, if you've spoken to the team, what do you want? What are your needs? They might have come up with an idea. That just shows that you're putting the supporters at the forefront. Learning and development activities that will enhance staff wellbeing, understanding, and may be embedded into the working environment practice in the long term. This sustainability, is it something that can continue beyond? How is it going to continue beyond? And imagine if collaboration between organisations, actually, could you combine two things that you do and bring together a different collaborative funding application? That's something we welcome and love, because actually if you're doing similar things and you can take those skills, that might be that mentoring approach, and demonstrating the sharing of resources or expertise which address/encourages staff wellness. We love a collaboration here at CCF. But we've got to bring it back, I suppose, to what is then needed more generally. So now you've got your idea, you know you want to go. There are some documents that you need to have. If you've applied with us before, it may be that you already have these, but it's always a nice reminder. So we would need a recognised governing document. So whether that's a constitution, articles of association, or just an A4 establishing your rules. We always ask for a minimum of 3 unrelated members on your committee, whether it's called a committee, trustees, depending on the group you are. And if your details need to be registered on Companies House, Charities Commission, that they are registered where they need to go. We always ask for a safeguarding policy. That doesn't matter if you're working with children, it's vulnerable adults and vulnerable people as well. And we ask for a bank account in the organisation's name, which requires 2 unrelated signatories and a bank statement within the last 3 months. So that's sort of documentation you'd need to then be ready to go. Few things we can't support. So sort of staff salaries and wages, any alcohol or medication, building works or large scale refurbishment, This is about the supporter themselves, not the building that they work in. Consultancy, research or feasibility studies, and research projects or activities outside of the listed area. The listed area is Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Anything away from that, that's when you could go for another community foundation. And more generally, there are a few things we can't support. So outside Cornwall and Isles of Scilly, something that helps only one individual, commercial profit-making organisations, endowment funds, something that's statutory. So this is something we get a lot. We can't fund schools directly, but we fund PTAs. We can't do parish councils, but we can do friends of associations in that sense. Promotion of political causes. Projects intended to influence people's religious choices. On this one, I suppose we often support churches because they are community spaces, but if it was a sense of something to push a religious view, then that's what we couldn't support. But we know something like a church is a community space where supporters will need to be supported. Activities or projects that have already happened. I suppose this will be less the case here because we're looking probably for quite a new idea as well. National bodies that do not benefit local people or whose beneficiaries are not people. If you're looking to fundraise beyond that, then we can't. And if you've got significant free reserves, I suppose a little bit different because this might be something that you're building your capacity in a different way. But that's our go-to list of things that we can't unfortunately support. A big one to probably note is you might be thinking in one-to-one support of people's well-being. A lot of ideas that's been coming up is perhaps counselling or therapy. Now, this probably isn't the place to go because there is actually something called Care Coins that's run by Cornwall's Voluntary Sector Forum, and that is a space. So actually, a lot of people aren't aware of it. That's a space if someone within the charity sector does require some sort of therapy or counselling, then they can get some free sessions through Care Coins. And so is an avenue you can go for your supporters. And isn't really then needed to apply with this fund. But I suppose the big things we want to go back to and important to remember in this is that the core driver for this fund is that preventing burnout and enabling healthy work forces. It's different when there's a peak moment, that may be when you're going to Care Coins because there is that moment of sheer burnout, but it's that longevity to prevent this burnout that 94.3% of workers can feel. And always think about long-term benefits this will give to your service users and supporters. It's not about that one-off feel-good moment. Let's go out for a meal, feel great for the day, and then go back to what has caused the burnout in the first place. It's trying to allow that space and capacity and that money that's perhaps not been available to be able to achieve that long-term benefit. You can, in my view, you can fundraise and have that money for one meal, but what will that do in the long run? And I suppose besides supporting the supporters, of course, Sadell Collins Foundation has their own fund as well, with grants of up to 10,000 available. And I suppose the next fully open opportunity and that will be later on in the year, but know that that does run as well alongside it. It's just that this time we are also doing supporting the supporters. How the process will then work, you've got your idea, you know, you've looked through the criteria and you think that will be a perfect fit. It's an innovative idea and it's supporting our supporters for the long run. There's an online application that I'll take you through in just a moment that you will complete. That will get sent to Lisa in this case. It will either be Lisa assessing or an external assessor. And what I suppose is quite unique about CCF is that if we have any questions, and there may be quite a few questions because it's the first time we've done it, they will ask those questions. Sometimes there's nothing worse if it's put in the no pile, and if you go, oh, if they only just asked me that question, I could have explained it and it could all have been sorted. So we'll always go back and ask those further questions because we want to have the most accurate picture of what you do, why you are doing it. And so then with that information, it will go to a panel and it's discussed. And then the decision is made. You will be informed of that decision. If it's unsuccessful, you can come back to me for feedback and hopefully the grant is received. And all we then ask is that it's usually a year period. And at the end of that year, you then get given an end of grant report. So it's really important to think as you go, how are you assessing the impact? Are you gathering data as you go? Because then there's nothing worse that you get your report at the end and you think, what did we do? How did we do it? And what was the impact? So important to think of them. Here's a little screen grab, I suppose, of what the application form looks like. If you haven't started, you won't have seen it. So some general info to begin with, quite specific to who you are. A big one to look at is your overall aims and objectives. We need that in 100 words, so it's good to be concise. It'll ask you about the volunteers size you've got and about some accounting. The big one, I suppose, here is, and looks a little bit different to some of our other forms, is the questions that you have, but we've given you more words to do it because it's something that's quite different. So we'll ask you, what wellbeing challenges do your staff volunteer team face? Of course, addressing that as clearly as you can. But a major one is then, what activities will you deliver to address these wellbeing challenges? It's all well and good telling us the burnout and how your staff feel, but actually, how do you plan to address it? And then there's a third question of actually, what impact will this project have? How will you know if it's working? Will the work continue after the funding ends? And if we're focusing on sustainability and longevity, that's an important question. And then some notes about different beneficiaries, primary outcomes, and different parts of your budget. So the main bulk of questions, yes, there's wording to them, but there's only really 3-4 major bulk questions, but it's about being quite clear as well with your budget that you've thought about this and where it will go. And I suppose that is it for a quick rundown about the actual fund. There's always support that you can come with me if you want to discuss further one-to-one. You can book a session, you can join different workshops. There's lots of support available if you do want to sit and ask further questions about the fund and how it runs. Fantastic. We'll go to questions